Welcome to the Bodybuilding Banter Podcast, your number one source of all things bodybuilding. Be sure to like and subscribe to stay up to date on future episodes. Now, here's your host, Leroy Rollins.
Welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Thank you.
So you just finished the gym. How was it?
Yeah, good. I had a client who's competing in 4 weeks and 7 weeks, coming to do legs. So,
Nice.
so that was good. So leg session and taking him through some training session and also some posing as well. So that was cool.
Is he doing classic bodybuilding or?
No, he's doing the UKFDA British finals because
Nice.
open this year, which is the first one of the year, and then the BNBF British finals as well. So just lightweight bodybuilding and masters bodybuilding. He falls into both. So
Perfect. So for those that might not know who you are, give us a rundown of what you're all about.
So I started bodybuilding back in 2008. So quite a while ago now.
Yeah.
I started competing with the BNBF, which is the British Natural Bodybuilding Federation over here. I basically had a really good run right from the start. So I did my first qualifier in Scotland, won my qualifier, and then went to that year they had raised the age of juniors from like under 18s to under 23s.
Okay.
So it fell really well for me because I was like 22, so I was like the oldest junior as well.
Yep.
And I won the British in that first year. So, and then obviously from kind of doing that at my first show, I mean, I had already been training since I was like 14. So I'd already been training for like 7 years before I did my first show.
Yep.
It's just that really, I didn't really know much about bodybuilding at the time and everything. So, so to be sort of fair, really, I had a good run in it from the start. I could have had some success with it. So,
Yep.
And absolutely got the bug for it. So just kind of went from there, really.
What got you into the sport? Because I think it's always an interesting story. Did you have family around it, or?
It's pretty cliche as far as like, you know, your usual bodybuilding background story. So without hyping on probably like everybody else does, it's like I was always in competitive sports. I got released from football contract or soccer contract, I guess you guys would call it, when I was like 17. I had already been doing bits in the gym and everything as well. I played semi-professional for a year,
Sure.
and then basically just went into like just doing the gym, and that was the kind of thing I found. I mean, I was always like, I did athletics. I sprint. I was a sprinter from a young age. I run national level,
Wow.
so I was always like, I was pretty gifted in kind of like, you know, I was always like, I had a six pack when I was like 9.
Yeah.
So like I always had like good muscle density, and I was really sporty, and you know, I didn't really sit still. Could never ever put any body fat on. Like I was always lean as a kid. It wasn't until I got to about 18 where I somehow managed to discover the fat gene.
Sure.
And I was just always constantly battling an off season with kind of like keeping my weight down, if that makes sense.
Right.
So that's probably just due to probably the amount of activity I was doing as a kid compared to as I got a bit older, I guess, really.
Right on. So after that, you know, first crack at it, obviously, like you said, you got some success. You probably were like, okay, I think we might be onto something here. So then what was the process after that?
So, I mean, after winning that first year, obviously that was my last year of juniors, so I'd be stepping up to the Mr. categories, and everyone was like, you'll do really, really well.
Yeah.
But that was a really big learning curve that year. I did my first show in 2009 at the Welsh, and I came 4th out of 4. Like I was way off conditioning wise. Obviously, think I just need to be bigger because I was in the men's categories.
Yeah.
And that was really humbling because I kind of, like you would at age, I guess like 22, you think you know it all already.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So I was kind of like, you know, very humbled the fact that, you know, I was like, they called me in 4th place, and I was like, they've got it wrong. Surely, I've won. Like they must just have the things wrong, and obviously they hadn't. It was just, you know, still way too fat for competing for that year. But you know, I pretty much took like a day off the diet and was like disappointed, was going to give up the season kind of thing, and I just thought you can do better. I haven't really put all that I probably needed to put into it, so that was a big sort of learning curve. And then I managed to then eventually qualify for the lightweight trophy, or lightweight Britain, which I probably came down about another 15 pounds from my qualifier.
Oh, wow.
So then I did in the Mr. categories, I went from expected to be like a middleweight to a lightweight. So I actually, when I did my first show as a junior, was about 12 stone 3. And I ended up at like 11 stone 3, 11 stone 4 or something by the end. So I was like 72 kilos, whatever that works out to be, in pounds. So yeah, as I said, it's going to be like the low 160s or so.
Yeah.
So that was a bit of a like, you know, like it took a lot to get to that sort of stage, but that's kind of where I needed to be. Yeah. And then I placed second in that lightweight class, and I did exactly the same in 2010. So it was basically 8, 9, and 10 competing. Won the first show, runner-up 2 years at the Britain. So that's when I took some time off, basically.
Awesome. So what was the biggest feedback as far as your physique goes? Like, where did you need work? Where did you need to bring up? Obviously, you were 3 or 4 shows deep at this point. You're like, okay, we need an off season. We need to improve. What was the main target at that time?
Yeah, so I mean, the biggest thing that I think I can compete with anybody from the front and side, pretty good. I guess when I was younger, maybe not quite as dense as I needed to be. Sure. But like back and hamstrings, like I hadn't even trained it, and that was really evident with how I trained. It was like I didn't enjoy training back. My back sessions looked like pull-ups, and that was probably like that and a couple of one-arm rows, like just like little light squeezes. Yeah. So when I competed in 2009, I narrowly missed out on winning the pro card that year because they gave it out because it was a 10th year anniversary. The lightweights, middleweights, and heavyweights all won pro cards, the winner of their divisions. Okay. And it's actually one of my best mates in bodybuilding now who beat me, which is Baz Cunliffe. And his back was twice as good as mine. And it was really evident when I got the pictures back to go, okay. Yeah. So that's what they're kind of talking about. So that was then my focus, and it still is now. Like, it's still not as good as the front side. You probably see if you ever look from the pictures and stuff. It's got better, but it's still not. If it was to match the front, I'd be a different bodybuilder, I think. So
right. So what did your training look like at that time? Just a lot more volume, more attentive to it.
So I actually, I mean, I've always been, I would say, considered like a fairly high volume trainer. Probably more so over the last 7-year period. Like, I'm very opposite. I guess I'm a bit more bro and a bit more old school with regards to like how I train. It's very much more now. I guess it's more popular, and the push pull leg programs, and kind of programming that way. Like everyone kind of follows like JP over here. Do you know who JP is?
Oh, of course.
Yeah, okay, cool. So it's all that kind of like training splits, and I have tried it. It's just I just prefer it kind of like the way I always used to do things. Really, it's typical bro split. Yep. But yeah, in general, it's high volume. I would say that I do have aspects of where I kind of like working towards top set, so you can kind of say it was more hit stuff, but. Yep. There's an awful lot of kind of fluff involved with getting to those top sets as well, I think. So that's maybe how it differs. Yep. So yeah, that's kind of how it was.
Awesome. How long would you typically prep, and has that changed over the years?
Oh yeah, it's changed massively. The first year I was 2008. Guy helped us with our very first bodybuilding prep. He hadn't done a show before, but he'd got pretty close, and he kind of knew quite a good bit about nutrition and bodybuilding. His training was like exceptional, so he really kind of put us through our paces on that stuff. But about September, the year before the show, or before that sort of prep year, he was like, "Right, here's your diet." It was like, "Okay, you guys need to eat." So it was kind of like, "All right, yeah, sweet." So my kind of thought process was like, "Well, if I'm a fairly big eater, if they've got those 2 meals there, I'll just eat them together. Yep. I'll just do this. I'll eat bigger. But what happened was I ended up then piling on a load of weight. I actually started my prep that year at 220 pounds. So this is like 22 years old and like very overweight, shall we say. But at that age, you think, I just need to be big.
Yeah, big.
So yeah, it was very much like all the calories. I remember being on like the mutant mass,
Yeah.
So getting the calories, 1,000 calorie shakes in and things like that. And I actually did that prep. It was just a 16-week prep to my first show. And I ended up competing at like 12 and a half stone or so, which is like, as I said, it's about 78, 79 kilos, something like that. Wow. But not quite sharp, but it's kind of enough for a qualifier for your first show.
Sure.
So that was kind of that was how it kind of looked. So 16 weeks was like, a lifetime prepping wise. It's actually become a bit of a joke, but this year I started prep last September to this September.
365 days.
I definitely have a harder time losing body fat than I ever used to.
Okay. How old are you, by the way? I don't think we mentioned that. How old are you now?
I'm 34.
Okay.
So I've been doing it a fair while, actually. I think as I've got older, it's definitely been hard to lose body fat. I do get fat in an off season. That's always the way I've done it. It's not through eating rubbish. I eat a lot of good food. I just eat a lot of calories, and like I train hard. I probably don't do a lot of cardio as much as I should do in the off season.
Right.
But my body I've just gained weight. It's just one of them bodies that some people can just kind of maintain eating a lot of food. Like I could eat 2,500 calories a day and still get fat. Like it's my clients eat way more food than I do. But it's kind of like to yield a result, you have to do what you have to do. Yeah. So that's just my base level. That's where I have to go to. So like this last year, I think from like an off season, I was looking at around 3,500 to 4,000 calories a day, and I got up to 103 kilos. So same again, 220 pounds or so.
Holy.
And I compete at 165.
Yeah.
So that's
a lot.
4 stone or whatever, or 60 pounds or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Had to come off. It just took me a long time. So
that's crazy.
Yeah. So
fast forward to now, you are now a new IFBB Pro. How's that feel?
Pretty surreal, actually. It's. I think it probably took about a week for it to like settle in.
Yeah.
It was like driving to my mate's house to celebrate. Basically, we always have like a victory cigar, so it's all meet up with my mate down where I grew up, and it was very overwhelming. Like, shit, this is what we've just done, So it was kind of like that. It was very much like it's sinking in, and there's still so much come of it. Like I've got, my first pro show in 7 weeks' time. Yep. Like I've taken on more coaching clients this week. All that stuff is just kind of like this, yeah.
So being natural, was this ever, on your radar? Like, I want to be an IFBB Pro. Did it kind of just fall into place in this season? Like, how did it all play out?
It's something that we always would have wanted, but it was never ever feasible. From, we all dream of being an IFBB Pro,
yeah.
But the thing is, if it hadn't have been for the introduction of classic physique, it never ever would have happened. Yeah. And there's like sort of a blanket statement from. If you look at the show photos, I'm no way near the best bodybuilder on that stage.
Yeah. Like,
not by a long shot. There's guys that were harder than me. There's guys that were bigger than me. The guys who like legs were twice the size of mine, but they weren't better classic bodybuilders. And that is like filling criteria. People who don't really follow bodybuilding. If you meet a criteria, if you've got, you're looking for someone with blonde hair, blue eyes, and everyone else turns up has got brown hair and brown eyes.
Yeah.
Like you have to judge the best of what you've got on that stage. But I was kind of one of the people who turned out with blonde hair, blue eyes, and it was like, right, that's what we want. That's classic physique. So that's why you then beat guys who are like twice the size of you and harder than you. So, so I said, I think it's kind of, I think it's hard for some people to accept that who maybe were competing that day. And it's all been really positive or anything. It wasn't any kind of like backlash after it. It's just that people were like, like backstage, not really looking at you and thinking, well, he's just small.
Yeah.
But obviously I composed well, meet the criteria, condition was good enough.
Yeah.
And you're ticking boxes. And that's kind of how it was, really.
Yeah, I think they're starting to, figure out what they want in classic physique. I think the last, first few years of introducing the category, it was still, what exactly does this category mean? What are we looking for? Because you look at, at the highest level, the Olympias, all of the classic physique Olympia winners have looked very different. You know what I mean? And now that with Bumstead in the front running spot, I think that is now giving a perspective of what they're looking for. Like if you look at him and you side by side versus him and some of the other guys you might have competed against, there would be more similarities between you and him just from, a classic physique standpoint, which, like you said, you can then beat guys that are maybe 30 pounds heavier than you, more muscle, but just not classic, right?
Yeah. So the guy in the overall, Jimmy Tonkinson, his name is, was 70 pounds heavier than I was.
Holy shit.
So, do you know what I mean? Like that just, it goes to show when they judge it as classic should be as criteria, that's how you'll end up beating guys like that. So when people see it on news channel or whatever, or see it on what thing, how was that guy won? But as I said, it's not bodybuilding. It's classic bodybuilding. And it's very different on the way that it should be judged. And same with when you have figure competitors and stuff like that. You can be too big or too small for the class, but it's not often in bodybuilding you can be too hard or too conditioned. I don't really think that was the issue. I just think that it's shape and flow carries you a long way in that class, and that's what people need to sort of understand about it, really.
So where do you think you would have edged out in that overall? If you step back and look at the physiques, where do you think you took a point or two?
Presentation was a huge part. I think that it's just lines and flow. As I said, I always say to people, and it's kind of this is not kind of a harsh thing to say, so it's not to be taken any sort of criticism, I guess, really. But all the things about being a natural bodybuilder is what made me set me aside from the other guys. So my waist was half the size of everybody else's. Yes. Okay, my legs, arguably, of course, can come up for sure. But it's actually that lines and that flow under the detail through the midsection, it made everyone else's waist look wider. So, as I said, as I want to sort of repeat on, if it had been classed as bodybuilding, I wouldn't have placed top 5, no doubt. Yeah. But it was all that, the line, shape and flow and presentation and tan, skin tone, everything. It was that was basically just ticking boxes, and that's kind of how it went.
Yeah, yeah. When you do classic over there, is it the same as over here where you have front double, side chest, back double, ab and thigh, and then classic pose? Is it the same?
Yeah, we also have side tricep as well, which it actually wasn't on the criteria sheet, but I practiced it anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
But they had that. So and it's probably one of my best shots. So my mate was like, "You've got to do it, even in a transition, even if you don't get to hit the shot." Yeah. So because it's probably one of my better shots. So that was nice. But as I said, international stage, I don't know whether that will differ or whatever.
Yeah, so that's interesting because we don't have, here in Canada, for example, we don't have the side tricep, which you look at a lot of classic guys and they hit that quarter side tricep with the quad. It's a fantastic shot if you can hit it.
Side tricep is as classic as it get. It looks nutty and it's kind of it's almost like a front on tricep, isn't it? But it shows a lot, to your physique, and I think if you hit it well, they should include it, I think. But it's what it is.
Yeah, for sure. When it comes to transitions and stuff, you think that played a huge part? When you go from your front double, instead of just a lot of bodybuilders just stop, turn, side chest. You get that swing, hit it.
I think it doesn't need to be too what's the word? I guess to it too kind of over the top. Yeah. But you need to know how to turn around whilst keeping body parts hard. And I think that transitions are important. But it was more. It's just the overall presentation. I practice posing a lot. Far more probably more for this show than some of the other shows, because it was if I'm going to be outmassed and I'm going to be out conditioned, I need to be able to hold poses all day long. Yeah. And it's really fortunate that the natural fed that I've always competed in, which is the BMBF or the DFAC, you'll go through 7 rounds of 4 turns at a British Grand Prix before you get to muscularity. Yeah. And with classic, I'm doing half the amount of poses, and there's one call out, and then it's to the back and then to the front, and then you might get a second call out, whatever. But we probably did 3 probably went through 3 or 4 rotations on the whole day, including the overall. Whereas, like, you know, like it was like half the amount I'm used to. So it's kind of like when you've kind of like that's what you've been like brought up with. It's like, you know, you should be able to do that with no problems at all. Yeah. You know.
Yeah. Are you much to hit a vacuum when you're
I can hit it. It just doesn't look very good. Reason being, you have to have that nice rib cage line.
You know what's hilarious? So yesterday there was a show here locally. I had 2 clients compete, and one of the clients, his wife came up. She has no perspective on bodybuilding, nothing about it. So I'm sitting there with her, and I'm explaining things to her. And one of the guys in the classic class hits a vacuum, and she goes, "What's that?" I said, "That's a bad vacuum." And she goes, what are you even talking about? And he had, you know, funny you mentioned rib cage. He just didn't have a good rib cage, and it did not look good on him. And he kept, every time they call abs and thigh, he would hit that, and he would just hold it. And then he'd do like the sideways, you know how like the old photos of the guys turning sideways?
Yeah.
And his ribs, it did not look good. So it's very funny you mentioned that, because I agree.
I think guys, you know, when guys have got like quite big ab distension and they can hit a vacuum and it pulls that in tight, like a Jose Raymond type shot front double, like that looks great. But it's like when you've just got someone who hasn't got a good abdominal wall, or they've got good abdominals, and they hit a vacuum in place of like where like a nice abdominal will look and a nice abs and thigh, it doesn't do your physique any justice. It's just like hit it because it's classic. As I said, it's like I can hit one, but if I hit like I do the 2 variations on the front double, so I have to twist to the side slightly to do that, but it still doesn't look as good as the other one.
Yeah.
So like for me, like, it's like, okay, if it became a mandatory pose, I can do it. It's just, as I said, it doesn't look better than the other one. So
yeah, I think too, like it's abs and thigh as well. At the end of the day, it's not vacuum and thigh. So I think if you're going to hit it in that pose, hit it at the start as maybe a transition, but then, you know, exhale and hit those abs, right? Because I think that's what's being judged, in my opinion, just by the name of the pose.
I totally agree. I think it's nice if you can. I would kind of make the argument that maybe it has kept my waist smaller over the years, or maybe like learning to do it. Like I could do it when I was like 9.
Yeah.
What it was.
Yeah.
But so it does help with like your midsection control.
Yeah.
But I definitely don't think it hurts to be able to have it in your locker if you need to use it. It's just it shouldn't replace what would already be a better something like, as you said, like a proper abs and thigh pose.
100%. What are your classic poses that you go to?
So the first one is like in between like a lat spread and a front and a bicep shot. Yeah. So that one. I can do like the sort of 3/4 sort of like side double, which is kind of like that one. Yep. That's really hard to hit. I can only actually hit that properly about 2 weeks out from a show when my waist is properly small.
Yeah, your waist needs to be almost gone.
Yeah, and actually I went and had I get deep tissue done maybe every week, every 2 weeks, especially on contest prep. Not so much off season. I maybe get like once a month or something. But the guy had adjusted my hips, and it was the first time I hit it. I was like a week out from the show.
Wow.
Because I just couldn't get my legs round enough to be able to do the shot. Like people try and do it and not look like they've just got their hips front on. Like it's really actually very difficult.
Oh, for sure.
So that's different to a lot of other people. They don't tend to hit that as well. So
awesome.
You know, it's nice to have something different.
Yeah, for sure. So now what? So what's the game plan now?
So I didn't take any time off the diet. We went for a 5 guys night after the night of the show. Pretty much just kept all my food. We went for breakfast the next morning, just had some eggs on toast or whatever. And then basically just kept things really tight. I'm about 5 pounds up from the show because I've just increased my food this week. And then I've got basically now 7 weeks from like Saturday just gone for the first pro show. So I'll then start my sort of descent down again, really. And, you know, and like looking back from the show is kind of like I said, it's a funny thing to say, but I was probably about 85% of what I would usually consider what I could be at my best contest conditioning wise.
Wow.
So and not a lot of scale weight. It's just getting lean and spending time there.
Yep.
especially for naturals. I think you'll get harder, the skin will get thinner as you just continue on. Like for maybe guys who are assisted, it's easily for them to go one way or the other because it's like more of a high maintenance physique, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Having to do more stuff and take more stuff to sort of maintain that where they are. And that's a pretty blanket statement, so I don't want to sort of generalize it. But for me, every time I've done shows, like the first show of the year is always a bit of a write-off. That's the best I've ever placed in any show I've done in my first show round, apart from the very first year I competed in 2008. Because I'm just never tight enough. And it's like, you need that time for them little areas like the glute ham tie-in to come in properly. I've got like fat arm syndrome on the outside of my arms. Like they never get really tight. Sure. Whereas like the frontal bicep they will, but like it's like a side chest pose. They're always just that little bit chunky and full. Right. But when they're properly dialed in, it makes all them other shots look even better. So that's kind of where I am of kind of areas, and the legs as well. Like no doubt, my legs have been way harder in the past. So,
do you think that you need to be as hard in classic?
Yes, if you have my physique, you do. Okay. And the reason why I say that is because my proportions only get better. Yeah. Because I'll probably lose another inch off my waist. Yep. And then it's like, right, okay, so the outside sweep on the legs looks better. Yep. I have like, where I tend to carry my body fat is like lower back, so my back will get better. Yep. So I think that, people say, oh, well, you need to come in with like, you need to be full and shapely. You can't come in, flat and over dieted, but there's definitely like, it depends on the look that you want, but some people will get away and looking a bit better with a bit more fullness for classic. For someone like myself, definitely the harder I get, the more classic I'm going to look, and it'll just look, stood in the front, relax, you'll look nails, and that's the kind of, what I'm after.
Nice. So what's the show? Where is it?
So it's actually an IFBB Pro called Jamie Dorigo. He is a 212 competitor. He's prepped by Chris Aceto, big fan of his as well. So he is launching his YouTube subscription website. So basically, or a subscription, training site like JP does and things like that. So they have become one of the main sponsors of the show. So they are on the same day putting on the British Grand Prix. So that's Open or 212, I think. Or both, classic physique and men's physique. So they are putting on that whole show, sponsoring that. So it's like, the big show to come to Britain, which hasn't happened for a long, long time. Like they've had odd British Grand Prix here and there. Sure. So that is the first pro show. So it made total sense to do that. It gives me enough time as well to kind of, actually hit it where I sort of peak for it, really.
That's amazing, man. So now that you have, because you have pro cards elsewhere, correct?
Yeah, so a DFAC Pro. Yeah. So you win the BNBF over here. It's a very difficult pro card to achieve. You basically, over here, you have the BNBF British Finals. They have like 7 qualifiers through the year. And I judge at shows as well. That's why, I've done that for the last 5 years or so. Yeah. And basically each, or top 2 to top 3, depending on how good the standard is, will qualify for that British Finals. Obviously, the class winners of obviously all the British Finals would go into the overall, and that one overall has got a pro card. So there's only one a year. So we're actually really close, tight-knit kind of guys, who are all the guys who've won pro cards over the years. Like the one who won like a couple of years ago, he's one of my training partners. Like I train with him most days. Yep. So that's cool. So we're all sort of good mates, judge at shows together, all that kind of thing. So it's quite a good community with that. But I didn't win my pro card until 2013, so that's when I won that one, and then you become a DFAC Pro. Yep. So then it was just kind of then, as I said, doing that. And you tend to find with natural bodybuilding, I guess, that people kind of go with their federations and they kind of stick with them, if that makes sense. Yep. There is a little bit more of a crossover now. But I think people are just kind of like, brought up with one federation, they do well and they kind of stick with it. Yeah. So obviously you've got the other natural federation over here is the UK FBA, which is United Kingdom Drug-Free Bodybuilding Association, and then you become a WNBF Pro. Correct. So the WNBF and DFAC are 2 sort of pro ranks. And then obviously, as I said, you could hold a pro card like some people have got both. but it was just never something that I sort of, did. I was sort of doing well in pro level at DFAC, and I just kind of stuck with that role. Because effectively, what's funny is that we will recognise a pro card from any other natural federation in the DFAC, but the UK FDA will make you go back as an amateur instead of competing as a pro.
Right. So
if I wanted to do that show, I would effectively be like a lightweight, and I'd be in the lightweight amateur. So for me, I'd have to go back a step to then go up a step. So, and same again, you could go there and get smoked. I mean, the likelihood of that happening when you're a fairly high caliber athlete, probably not. But as I said, it's kind of one of them. Like I just never had the appetite for it.
So what's the plan now? So you finish off this season, and then what's the goal?
Who knows, actually, because, I mean, I'm definitely going to stick with the IFBB.
Okay.
I think that it's kind of like, it'd be hard to almost go back a step if I guess you consider the IFBB the sort of pinnacle of what you can get to, and that's I'm sure most people would agree on that front. It's not to take anything away less from anything else, but classic bodybuilding suits me. I think that's always, since it was ever announced, people were like, you've got to do classic, and everyone was telling me you've got to do it. Yep. And the reason I off so long was because the qualifiers were always so early in the year for me. I would have to be in shape by June, and it always takes the fat kid to get till about September before I'm kind of there. So so that's the one, to be honest. That so pro shows in 7 weeks, to answer the question, and then from there, I mean, that's an Olympia qualifier. So, if
man, you imagine?
I was absolutely just blown away to win my class at the British, let alone to then win the overall. It was just I gave the worst acceptance speech because I just didn't know what to say. It was just kind of a bit of a joke. My mates were all laughing about it. I was just I'm just so happy to be here. This is so great. So that was quite funny, but yeah, as I said, from that point onwards, if I was to ever get to that, that's dream come true. But I mean, you're competing against guys who are still very, very classic and going to probably be twice the size. So no expectations, no pressure. I'm just going to go and peak as best as I can. Yep. As I said, if it helps raise my profile for coaching and things like that, then great. It's awesome. And I'll just stick with it, I think. So
that's awesome, man. Man, that's cool to hear. Just because being a natural athlete myself, it's cool to see what truly can be done. It just takes a little bit of time and consistency, and like you said, ticking all the boxes, right?
Definitely. I mean, as I said, without the introduction of classic physique, it wouldn't have been done. But if you are a shape guy, then 100% go and do an untested show in classic, because you will still have pretty good lines most of the time for natural bodybuilders. Yeah. You always have a good midsection, and as I said, unless you're not blessed in that sort of genetic department, if you like. But it's one of them that I think that that's one of the most things I've been so blown away with, was the amount of messages I had saying, basically in my country, we don't have classic bodybuilding, or we don't have natural federations, and I've seen what you've achieved, and I want to go train today, and I'm going to compete next year. That is convince 5 people and they are absolutely blown away with it, then it's well worth doing. Yeah. So that's the kind of thing which I was sort of really taken back by, was this is amazing. You're inspiring other people to want to compete, and as I said, stay natural, and that is always the plan. It's something I've always thought about, back in the day. You sort of think, oh, should I, shouldn't I, whatever. Yeah. But it was just never really a thing, because I had such good success in natural bodybuilding. But why would I? And I've done untested shows before. I've done a PCA show over here. I came second in classic out of about 20 guys. I won a UK BFF untested show in classic, and I also did an open bodybuilding show as a lightweight, and won the overall at that as well, which was a show within NABA. Yep. And same again, turned up in really good condition, good shape, good flow, and beat guys who were 50, 60 pounds heavier than me or more. Yep. So for me, it was always showing that I could do well, and I wonder why other guys don't do more. We've got some of the top pros in our federation, they even just turned up to one of these shows. I'm not saying they would just walk it, but they would. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like when Doug Miller did the Jay Cutler Classic.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, he'd absolutely blasted everybody. And it's still, when you're sharp and got good condition, good muscle tone, and you've got that maturity to your physique, you've been training 15 years or so, like, you will end up beating guys who maybe put that muscle on in like a 2-year period.
Yeah.
So,
it's a different look, right? It's a different look.
So, yeah, so that's cool. So it's, it's exciting because, it's, I think more so now that it's like that ever thing. It's like, if you're inspiring people to do that, it's kind of like, people are like, oh, so like, you're just going to like, just go on loads of gear now. It's like, well, no, because I've still got the same morals that I always had.
Yeah, you're a changed man now.
So why not just carry on,
That's awesome, man. Well, dude, tell everybody where they can find you, where people can inquire about coaching and stuff.
So just on Instagram, it's Bob Waterhouse 86. You can email me at robertwaterhouse86@gmail.com with any coaching inquiries. I don't tend to use Facebook that much anymore. So new school. But yeah, really, as I said, I'm kind of doing more and more coaching nowadays. I do actually have a full-time job as well, and eventually I will kind of transition out of that.
Yep.
But like, I really enjoy the coaching side. Like, I've got some great athletes competing this year, and I have been coaching since like 2014. And I had some like wicked like roster of clients and guys who won pro cards and everything like that. And it's really kind of like something that I want to do full time because I love coaching more than I kind of just want to make money. It's nice to have something that you enjoy doing, So that's cool.
Sure. Awesome, man. Well, again, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate taking time out of your day.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on, man.
Thanks everybody for watching.
Your own bodybuilding journey.
Yeah, man, appreciate it. Thanks everybody for watching. Be sure to follow this guy on Instagram. Stay tuned for that pro debut, and we'll see you guys in the next one.